on, so it's great to see you all this evening. This is the fifth in our series of annual London lectures, and the third as the Florence Pite Memorial Lecture. This is a most generous legacy that was given to the Guildford branch, and I'm hoping that Hilary may be here from the Guildford branch, but I didn't quite see her, but maybe she'll be on her way. But a big thank you to the Guildford branch, and they have supported this lecture. As I say, this is our third year. I think this evening we're in for a great treat. And the reason I say that is that this evening's lecture is rather different to many of our other lectures. And in these lectures, we showcase our work that we're sponsoring and supporting in the whole field of research and finding that cure for people with Parkinson's. The two big differences about tonight is, first of all, we're talking about electrons, not molecules. Usually we talk about molecules and how they can be developed into new therapies, but tonight is far more about digital technology and how that can accelerate the development of research and indeed give us therapies and approaches and applications that are able to be used now. So the second difference about tonight is time, because so often in these lectures we're looking at very promising research that we're supporting, but we're all so acutely aware of the time it takes to actually develop these therapies, get them fully regulated so that you can actually benefit from them. And so today, this evening, has got a very different time dimension, and that's great. So I hope you'll very much enjoy this evening, and I'd like to now hand over to Julie Dodd. Julie is our Director of Digital Transformation, a grand title for a grand job, but it is indicative of the fundamental changes both in our world, but indeed in Parkinson's UK, and how we use and deploy the research monies that you so kindly give us. Julie.
Thanks, Mark, and hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming this evening. As Mark said, my title is Director of Digital Transformation. It is a ridiculous title, really, so let me explain it in terms of the work that we do. Many of you will have been to events like this before and may have heard us talking about the work we're doing, striving to find better treatments and a cure faster. We also exist to try and help people live well with their Parkinson's day to day and provide crucial information and support services to help people do that. So how does my role play into that? I've worked in technology for the past nearly 20 years, and from the early days of it, dot-com boom and lots of silly businesses and us getting all excited when we had our first Skype video conferencing call, through to a really kind of expansive market looking at everything from virtual reality gaming to, I came across a startup yesterday that's providing voice-enabled, entirely automated pet food delivery service. There's a whole raft of things that sound quite futuristic, but my role is all about the reality of how technology can help us accelerate progress towards cure faster and to scale up our services so that we can be there for more people right now. People who are excluded from being involved for geographical or for social isolation reasons. People who maybe haven't come across us on some of the more traditional channels, or maybe don't want to engage with us in that way. We want to involve as much of the community and movement for Parkinson's as we can in our work. But you can't always do that when you've got Parkinson's by coming to our office or coming to meet us in person. So how can we do more of that remotely? We're going to hear tonight from a couple of fantastic speakers. Emma Lawton is now, we're lucky, working with us on a really exciting range of devices and apps for Parkinson's specifically and for related conditions that can provide a difference in day-to-day life now. It's a market that's growing really rapidly, and I won't want to give away too much of Emma's talk, but we're excited about, I think, a sector-leading approach we're taking to that. You're also going to hear from Jackie Hunter, who's one of the board directors of BenevolentAI, about how machine learning can help us accelerate progress towards a cure faster. I'm not going to go on too long because they're the speakers of the evening and they've got really interesting things to say. But I did want to briefly, hopefully, bring to life some of our ambitions for this big programme of work through a short video. Oh.
From finding our way home to finding new solar systems, technology has made the impossible seem possible. And we know it's our responsibility to do the same thing for people affected by Parkinson's. Make the impossible possible. Imagine if getting personalised advice and support was as easy as checking the weather, wherever you live and however bad your Parkinson's is that day. Or if you could spend less time on admin and more time with the people who matter. We've already begun to integrate digital technology into our daily work, but right now, we're only just scratching the surface. Being more digitally connected will allow Parkinson's UK to reach more people than ever before, at the tap of a button or the sound of a voice. And offering a range of ways to join in will make it easier for people with Parkinson's to get involved with projects and test out new ideas. Technology also has the potential to revolutionise the way people with Parkinson's take control of their own health. Right now, we're working to give more people access to new technologies, such as apps that help improve sleep, or devices to stabilise tremors. But in the near future, this could also mean helping people live independently for longer, using robotics to assist movement, or voice-controlled technology to free those with limited mobility, or things we can't even imagine yet, but that might just change someone's life. Machine learning is already accelerating the search for new and better treatments. AI technology can detect patterns in big data that could help us diagnose Parkinson's earlier and ultimately help find a cure. Digital technology is revolutionising our work, and we know that with your help, the day when no one fears Parkinson's will come even sooner.
I hope that gives a bit of a flavour about some of the things that we are already doing and that we hope to do in the future. And without further chat from me, I'm going to hand over to Jackie Hunter.
Thank you. Okay, it gives me great pleasure to come here, actually, for many, many reasons, but I've had a long association with Parkinson's disease. I worked on the first dopamine agonist for Parkinson's, Requip. My mother died from Lewy body dementia. We have a Parkinson's trial on excessive daytime sleepiness running out of our clinical group. And I'll talk about the partnership that we have in terms of our charity award that the Society won at the end of my talk. What I'm going to show you today is the potential of this technology to really be able to accelerate drug discovery and development. We haven't got examples of Parkinson's yet, but I'll show you how we're going to be using it to help in Parkinson's disease. Now, I'm from the pharmaceutical industry. I spent 30 odd years working in drug discovery and development in neurological diseases. And I got as frustrated as hell because actually the model, how we did it, just wasn't changing. And the failure rate was so high. Most people actually never work on a drug who work in the industry that makes it to patients. And the timelines are really long. Even if you've got a great idea for a particular target that you could work on, even before you can come up with a molecule, it's at least 5 years, and I've known some programs take 20, before that molecule is even ready to go into development, before it even gets near a patient. And there are lots of compounds that have failed in one indication that are just sitting on the shelf that are not being used in other indications because basically the chance of something happening is so low, it doesn't actually merit the investment in terms of the company doing this. So I don't think this is sustainable. I don't think it's sustainable for the industry, and it's certainly not sustainable for patients either. And one of the things that was also frustrating is that, you know, for an evidence-based industry, we weren't using all of the evidence, and that's not because people were willfully not, it's because of this. 90% of the world's data has been produced in the last 2 years. And there's a new research paper published every 30 seconds. 10,000 biomedical papers are uploaded onto the internet every day. No one person, no company, no group of people using traditional methods can keep abreast of that information. This information, it's a huge haystack. How can we actually, you know, get a better magnet to pull the real nuggets of information out, the best theories out of that haystack? And that's where AI comes in, and I'll talk a bit about how we're going to use it. But it's not just in terms of generating new hypotheses to test for drugs, for targets, for disease. It's also about how you can validate those much more rapidly using really high throughput systems. We can open the chemical space with artificial intelligence. It came as a huge shock to me that actually in the whole industry, most medicinal chemists only use about 30 to 32 synthetic routes to make a molecule. That really constrains the chemical space. The kind of vast array that you could work on is actually quite narrow. This allows us, by using machine learning, to come up with new, innovative ways of synthesizing molecules that we couldn't make before. It opens up the kind of chemical space. And we can actually, therefore, and what we are trying to do, I'm not going to talk about it today, but what we can do is to cut the timeline. Instead of taking 3 years to find a candidate, we can do it in 1. Instead of taking 1,000 molecules, we can do it in a couple of hundred. We can, and therefore that will not only cut the time, it'll cut the cost as well. It seems to have faded, and as it's faded, I won't talk very much about it, but the important thing is that it's going to impact drug development as well. It's going to enable us to stratify patients better, and we can already do that. It's enabling us to pick up the sort of biomarkers that have been talked about, that are being funded here by Parkinson's UK, and better able to do real-world monitoring, to be able to look for information from devices and other ways to really pick out what matters for the patient and make compelling arguments to regulators and developers to pick the right thing to study and be able to take compounds forward in ways we haven't been able to do before. So the company I work for was founded in 2013. The founder had the same vision that there was a lot of information out there and it wasn't being tapped effectively. And what I'll show you is how we've built, we call it a knowledge graph, but basically it's a way of taking all the known facts that we can get in public and some proprietary data across all of the biology of all the diseases so that we can actually build a sort of systems biology map of disease development. An important thing is that we bring together technologists and drug discovery scientists, and we work together in very different ways. We've got people who've come from traditional tech companies, and they say, we've never worked like this. And we've got people who come from drug discovery and development and say, we've never worked like this. And we've got, so that the drug discovery scientists ask the developers to come up with the solutions they really need. And the developers have to come up with solutions that are reliable and reproducible and can't zoom off to the next whizzy thing to develop. So it's really important we work in a very different way. Read all these papers that were uploaded, not necessarily in your own field, not necessarily in neuroscience, I'm a neuroscientist, but anywhere. And you could remember them all and then pull out the really important facts for the problem you want to look at. And you can then say, yes, that's the best hypothesis to work on. Well, that's what our platform allows you to do, because it has the capability and capacity to hold billions of facts and the relationships between those billions of facts. Most of the world we live in has messy, unstructured data. It comes in the form of scientific papers, it comes in the form of patents, but there are lots of structured databases as well. You need to be able to ingest this information in a way that allows the system to make sense of it, to read it, if you will, in the same way as we do. To read a sentence and know that AD, an abbreviation in that sentence, stands for Alzheimer's disease in that context, but in a different sentence, AD means atopic dermatitis. Here is acid labile substance, and here is mitral lateral sclerosis. So we apply, the machine can recognize all these entities we care about, like symptoms, like disease, like gene, and label them, and then it can use its own natural language processing to run over all this information and extract the relationships from that. So it can say, this gene is upregulated in this disease, this protein is inhibited by this chemical, and then we can create this huge knowledge graph of facts. So this just gives you an example of how we can recognize these entities. So here you have some enzymes, you have genes, and you have a disease. We can use the context here. If you look at the context at the bottom, at the sentence 2, a researcher is investigating SOD1. A researcher who is investigating SOD1 is suffering from ALS. That doesn't actually tell you anything about a relationship between the two entities. But if you have the sentence above where you could see this SOD1 mutation corrects an ALS phenotype in humans, that's a clear fact. It's an evidence of a relationship. And then by knowing all these known relationships, we can start to actually infer new relationships. When the periodic table of the elements was first described, there were gaps. And the gaps were elements you knew must exist, but we hadn't discovered them. And this is what we're doing here. There are facts which should be known, but we just haven't found them yet. And so what this video does, because I'm too scared to show you a live interrogation of the system over a Wi-Fi, is how our scientists would actually generate a new hypothesis in a disease that they had never worked in before. This is the sort of front-end bit that allows us to explore our knowledge graph and extract facts, in this case for a disease, for ALS. Now, ALS, there are many different types of motor neuron disease, or ALS. We can put in the term ALS and immediately access all the clinical trials, related diseases, the molecules, etc., associated with that. And using a concept overview page, which identifies all the things we care about. For example, here we're just looking at a disease map, and we can go in and interrogate all the different types of ALS, but we can look at all the different symptoms, the different clinical trials, the different patents, and just drill down deeper and deeper. So we've got 354 companies, all the clinical trials. We generate this using a under-the-hood set of algorithms and processes, so it's very flexible. We can interrogate and change them as we will and customize them for particular questions we want to ask. You'll be very happy to know I'm not going into the deep machine learning algorithms at this point in time. But we can also interrogate genomic data and other data sources and then incorporate them into this big knowledge graph to actually... So when we ask a question, we say, what novel hypotheses might there be to treat ALS? We can go in and the system will make inferences from the knowledge graph. We can select, look to see there are some that we don't think are good. We can select the ones we think are good. And the system will learn with the information we put in. And then this is basically the system building that systems map of motor neuron disease. All these points here are genes and proteins within the knowledge about ALS. And the lines indicate the relationships between those particular disease, between these particular entities. And then we can put our new hypotheses in and say, do they make sense? Do they fit into known pathways? And what mechanisms they actually invest in are important for us. So, for example, are they anti-degenerative? Are they pro-myelination? And we take that and then use that for new therapies. I just want to talk to you about ALS, because that's the area we're going to it shows you the workflow, if you will, of what we're going to do to generate new hypotheses in Parkinson's disease. But we can also use the system to identify opportunities for drugs which have failed in other indications. And this is an example here in ALS. ALS is a very rapid neurodegenerative condition. Many patients do not live beyond 5 years. The average survival rate is 3 years. Most of the cases of ALS, the cause is not known, they're sporadic, but about 10% are genetic. And we can look at both sporadic and genetic mutations, because although much of the symptoms are common, we can actually use stem cell technology to take fibroblasts from the skin of these patients and culture them so that we get neural progenitor cells. So we can induce neurons from patient astrocytes. We can also induce astrocytes, the support cells within the central nervous system, because both types of cell are thought to be important in the pathology, and oligodendrocytes from these cells. And what we've done with a group in Sheffield is we've worked to take those cells. If you take human, in this case astrocytes, and culture them with mouse motor neurons, the astrocytes you derive from patients who don't have, from people who do not have ALS, from controls, survive pretty well. But if we look at patients with either a particular mutation, C9orf, or from patients who have sporadic disease, you can see that they survive very poorly. So the astrocytes kill the mouse motor neurons. So this is a very nice model for us to look at. And here, basically we took our top 5 best hypotheses that came out of this system, and we looked at them in this assay system. And one of the drugs that turned out to be positive was a drug called gefitinib. It's actually an anti-cancer agent, and it rescued the motor neurons from not only from the C9orf, I'm just showing that here, so with increasing dose of gefitinib, we see rescue of the motor neurons, increased survival. Gefitinib is not an optimal molecule. It is extruded from although it gets into CNS tissues, it's extruded very rapidly. And so we're working to see if we can develop a molecule that targets the same pathway, but is more more brain penetrant with the right biophysical characteristics to be a good drug for ALS. But what's important out of what we've done in this program is we've actually identified 4 novel drug targets, different target families. We've already shown with one of those programs that we can move from target to hit within 3 months as opposed to 1 year, using our chemistry platform, which not only designs molecules, but also predicts their properties, and also predicts the properties of the molecules our medicinal chemists design as well. So there's a little bit of competition going on there with the machine and the medicinal chemists. So we are on track with this program within ALS to hit a preclinical candidate within 12 months. And we've already shown that for another program, not in the ALS program. And if we think about how we're going to carry out the clinical trials, we've used a publicly available database of, I think it's about 12,000 ALS patients who've been in clinical trials, to mine this PROACT database to better understand the patient trajectories. And we've not only replicated some published data, but we think we've identified a new patient subtype out of that. Trials going forward, either, depending on the approach, that we will make sure we're balancing across the trial for the fast and slow progressors, or if our approach is more amenable to either fast or slow progressors, we can enrich our patient population for that. So I use that as an example. So how does that help us with Parkinson's? Well, we started last year a charity competition where we said we would work with, we would give the use of our platform for free for a year and work with a charity who came up with a specific question that A, we thought would really accelerate something for patients, B, actually made use of the capabilities of our platform, and ideally, was actually showed demonstration of collegiality. And that's why we were really pleased that Parkinson's UK and the Cure Parkinson's Trust, together with Imperial and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, put in an application which we thought was absolutely spot on to what we could do to help. A consortium. Secondly, we felt that the virtual biotech model that Parkinson's UK have really meant that anything that came out of this could be very rapid. It was a real route to actually getting it to something that could move forward to patients rapidly. And also that there was patient involvement in looking at in the generation of the proposal, and subsequently this patient involvement on the steering committee. So patients are really at the heart of this. So in the same way as we've done for ALS, we want to use our platform working with Parkinson's UK and its partners to identify opportunities for repurposing agents, molecules that might have failed in phase 2 in another indication. We might also be lucky and identify opportunities for repurposing compounds where they are already being used but in a different disease. In the same way as we talked about with ALS, I'm really hopeful that we can identify new therapeutic targets. And because of the way our technology works, we'll be able to rank and prioritize these. Literally at the scale, the fact that you can do this at scale. I said at the beginning about enabling you to have a better magnet to pull more needles and better needles out of the haystack. We can press a button, we can come up with hypotheses. We still need to involve and take the insights of the experienced researchers and collaborators that Parkinson's UK and Cure Parkinson's have, because we need to. This allows you to have more options to pick the best targets using all the information in a really unbiased way. And then you can bring your bias to it and your experience and then think about how to take the best targets forward. So I'm really looking forward to the output of our collaboration, and I hope that I've shown you tonight the power of AI. I haven't talked about all the different things you can do, but I'm very hopeful that this will be good news for Parkinson's patients going forward. Thank you.
Should have said it at the start, we'll be having a panel after the talks for questions, so do jot down your questions on the cards that you'll have found on your seat, or whisper them to one of the Parkinson's staff nearby. I should also say that for anybody who's watching on the live stream, the videos that you can see on screen, there are links being put in the message window, so if you can't see them as well on screen, you can click on those as well. So I'm going to hand over now to Emma Lawton to talk about the work we've been doing looking at devices and apps, wearable technologies for Parkinson's.
Hi everyone, I'd like to show you a video firstly, if you'll let me. Some of you may have already seen it, so please apologise for that, but I hope you enjoy it if you haven't seen it.
this board does is I can connect into it through these wires. These are tiny coin cell motors. So these motors will vibrate. Hello, I'm Alison.
It's affecting something. I don't quite know what's happening. Something is going on with it.
What this is doing is it's short-circuiting whatever feedback loop there is between the brain and the hand that's causing the tremors. I'm onto something, right? I'm onto something. Jesus Christ. Oh, Lord.
It makes me forget that I have a tremor. I've had one of them for a long time. I was like passionate about it. Yeah, I was going for a straight line. I've actually just written my name for like the first time in ages. Mum, it's called the Emma. It's got my name on it.
Hi, I'm Emma, and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's 5.5 years ago at the age of 29. 2 years ago, I witnessed for myself the power of technology. The creation of the Emma Watch not only gave me the power to do the job I loved, but opened new opportunities to me. I began shortly after that working as a designer, freelance at Parkinson's UK, and I suddenly felt this ripple starting to pull through the organisation. We started getting a few hotline inquiries at first. Things like, where can I buy the watch from? I'm a developer too, how can I get my work developed further or tested? And then my personal email began to fill up as well with similar questions. And there was interest in other technology that might help people, suggestions about what worked for other people as well. I'll never forget going to a meeting with people with Parkinson's, and a gentleman came scurrying up to me, beaming, and he said, I've made your watch. And I thought, fantastic, how? Tell me. And he exclaimed, looking quietly smug, that he'd strapped an electric toothbrush to an elastic band, and it apparently had worked. So that's all you needed to do, Hyan. You didn't need to make me a watch, apparently. But all this activity proved that interest had been piqued. And not just the traditionally tech-savvy generations, people of all ages were ready to embrace all that technology could offer. And we in tandem realised the enormity and opportunity of this. On one hand, as the voice of authority people were turning to for medical technology advice, we could really potentially help change some lives. But on the other hand, a recommendation of a sub-power app or device could really put us in trouble, and our community. So if you imagine for a moment, we recommend a medication tracking app, something that helps you remember when to take your medication. The development company runs out of funding and folds for some reason or the other. The app stops getting updated. Dave isn't reminded when to take his medication anymore. Recommending an app or device can actually hold as much weight as recommending a medication for us. We had to know that what we were suggesting was A, safe, and B, effective, and that we were helping to foster the right progress in this field as well. So our cross-charity devices and apps working group basically pulled together a strategy and policy for how we could choose what to support and ultimately to recommend. Whoops, spoiler alert, that happens a lot with Parkinson's. Any request from a developer would be reviewed by our devices and apps working group at our monthly meetings, and we would decide if we were able to support it. Requests are sometimes for things like financial support, or just for kind of a user group testing a bit of help, or just for our brains. And then for those that had a developed app already, so something commercially available already, that wanted us to recommend that tech to our community, they would need to go through our testing process. And then it would appear on our tried and tested list. Shouldn't have bits of paper when you've got Parkinson's either. We suddenly found that we had a consistent and structured plan to move forward with. By testing everything and knowing that it was safe, we could recommend it and feel confident in it. And we're incredibly proud of this. Speaking to other charities, there's an appetite to do this kind of groundbreaking work, but while others were talking about it, we simply got on with it, to be honest. Our community doesn't have time to wait for new advances, and we feel that urgency every day. We're excited and proud to be able to lead the way and be brave in developing uncharted territory. So we decided we needed to look for a testing partner to do this work, to be able to validate the effectiveness and safety of the apps and devices going through our process. And we knew we had to have absolute confidence in them and their way of working. And we found Our Mobile Health, and they quickly became the obvious choice as their work with the NHS to create their apps library meant they themselves had been tried and tested already. The process felt robust enough for us to feel confident about making recommendations. Each app or device would be thoroughly reviewed by 3 professionals, ranging from subject matter experts, speech therapists, clinicians, people like that, through to those who are knowledgeable in data handling, accessibility and usability. But we were acutely aware that these people, however qualified to make decisions about effectiveness, didn't have Parkinson's. So they wouldn't actually be able to fully know whether the app or device was suitable. We decided that people at Parkinson's needed to be added into the review process front and centre. And we recruited a testing panel of tech enthusiasts from the community. They would review the technology at a second stage and produce videos and written reports of their findings. Their word would be final. So if it passed the test for the experts, but failed at our point, it wouldn't go on the list. The panel has grown over the past 6 months, but currently stands at 94 people, ranging in ages from 35 up to 82. Some are newly diagnosed, others have been living with the condition for over 20 years, and they span the length of the country. We launched our tried and tested list on our website, and you can find it under Information and Support in the main menu. 2 weeks ago, and we're getting a great response to it. We will constantly be assessing and adding new devices and apps to the list, but our initial 6 are as follows. The Beat Panic app that David the tester found a simple yet effective way to manage his anxiety attacks. The Cove app that helps you log your mood by making music, which let tester Joe feel like a playful child again. My little story thing on the floor. The Kindio app, where you can store memories and stories, which appealed to long-time journal keeper Martha. The Baziz sleep app that evaporated Tester K's cynicism and left her feeling refreshed. The Swallow Prompt app, which was so effective, Tester Davy's wife began swallowing in time with it too. And the Voice Analyst app, created by speech therapist Sam and her web developer husband. That's truly someone taking something that's needed in the community and creating something new. I would suggest wholeheartedly, although I'm obviously biased, that you visit the list. The reviews in themselves and the honesty that runs through them is worthy of 10 minutes of anyone's time just to read it. And some of the reviews have been kind of invaluable to the developers in helping them know how to move forward. Even those developers that didn't end up actually having their apps on our list, they've said that the advice that they got and the feedback that was so thorough has really helped them know how to move forward, and hopefully then when we test them again in the future they might make the cut. But for me, it wasn't the searingly honest and detailed reviews or the videos showing the apps in use that taught me the most. It was actually the panel themselves. During the 6 months we've been testing, there's been jobs lost, jobs gained, unexpected hospital stays, a misdiagnosis, people gone too soon, confidence grown, breakthroughs and excitement for the future. And I came to realise that this testing panel is actually a microcosm of the Parkinson's community, 94 lives. And that ultimately technology is a means to an end. It should never be the goal in itself. It should be part of the arsenal of medications, complementary therapies, diet, physio, sleep and exercise that we can use to help us live the lives we want to live. A way to help those of us living with Parkinson's to have the best possible life we could ever hope to live. And I think that's the important thing, not technology for technology's sake. I'd love to show you a quick video now to end my talk, which features some of the people from the Devices and Apps panel, and I think you'll see how passionate they are about the work we're doing.
Living day-to-day with Parkinson's can be really difficult, mainly because of the huge breadth of symptoms we face and how we all experience different sets of them. That's why I'm using the technology. There's a whole host of devices and apps out there that we can piece together to make our own personalised toolkit.
I have no doubt that smartphone apps, wearable technology will become part of an overall strategy to help us manage our Parkinson's and lead a much more enjoyable and fulfilling life.
There's a lot that is really very easy to do and enjoy all the technology can bring you. It will only get better.
Devices and apps can help us to communicate.
I sometimes struggle with the fact that I'm very slow. It's not to use the ability with our hands to type.
I've written a book, all dictated straight into the computer, and as I get less able, it gets more so.
Video calls can be quite good because you don't pay anything, you can speak face to face from anywhere in the world. You feel that people are with you and helping you.
They can help us to be more mobile and active.
There are all sorts of ways in which you can use technology to help you get enough exercise.
To have a beat going into your ear helps you to walk in a regular way.
They help us to regulate, measure and stay in control of our condition and our medication.
6 reminders on the camera. You can alter it and change it to how much time you require the notice to take it.
This app will measure all the way up to hi. When you visit your speech therapist, you then have some data.
You can also take the data from the app, extract it, download it, and you can therefore send it by email to your neurologist or your nurse.
Parkinson patients frequently have trouble sleeping. The app is designed to send you to sleep and wake you up at a preset time.
They can help us to foster and grow communities so we don't feel alone.
I do most of my corresponding with people via social media. I feel like I have friends who are going through the same thing as me and I'm able to share stories with them and really just to get comfort from them when it's needed.
They can make medical care and research more streamlined and inclusive.
I think more and more healthcare will actually take place online.
And the most important one here, it can help you carry on doing the things that you love. Because ultimately, as a person with Parkinson's, that's what keeps you you.
I'd just like to quickly finish with the next plans for the devices and apps testing. So we want to add loads more things to the list, and we'll continue to be testing and searching out what there is out there for people with Parkinson's, but also starting to look at devices, so things like computers and apps and phones and things like that. We get a lot of people asking for recommendations of actual devices themselves, so we're keen to build that area as well. But it's something I'm really passionate about, and I think it's going to help us really in the future. So thank you very much for listening to me talk.
Brilliant, thank you. Really inspiring. I'm going to ask the panel to join us. So Julie and Jackie and David Dexter, who's our Deputy Director of Research. Actually, it's been interesting. Just while we've been meeting, there's been a charity awards evening tonight, and Julie won a charity award for Digital Leader of the Year, and that's fantastic, isn't it? But I think the vision was, for me, this mobile phone just transforms everything I do, and I can do so much through this. But how is technology really changing the lives, the outcomes of people affected by Parkinson's? And I think it's been great to hear some of that today. So we're looking for questions online, questions in the audience. Can I just kick off, actually? David, can you just explain a little bit about how the BenevolentAI project fits within our overall kind of research strategy? While the questions are all coming.
Right.
Thank you.
one of the things that we want to do is, as Jackie said, that there's 3,500 drugs in our medicines cabinet at the moment. And just like aspirin, originally it was developed as a painkiller. Now it can thin your blood, and sometimes it's treating certain cancers as well. There are other uses for those drugs, but trying to find those drugs out and find out how they work takes a lot of time if you're doing it manually. But the beauty of the Benevolent platform is that we can do that work in such a short length of time. And also, it's not only drugs that are sitting in our medicines cabinet, it's all those drugs that didn't quite make the mark that is sitting on the shelves in the pharmaceutical companies, and we can also tap into those as well. So this really does tap into our research goal of about developing drugs for Parkinson's faster, not in 10, 15 years' time. What we want to do is actually identify those drugs, particularly in the repurposing field, and actually take them through preclinical testing, if they haven't been tested in models of Parkinson's before, or if they've been in man before, we can actually take them into clinical trials much quicker because they've got a good safety record and things. It just accelerates the whole process for us.
Brilliant, thank you. Some questions for you, Jackie. Talking about whether regular large pharma companies are starting to use this approach, and if not, why not? Something about the system presumably is developing all the time, and how much better and faster could it be? So what does this look like for the future, I guess?
Well, the pharmaceutical industry has been strangely slow to adopt this agenda. There are some companies that are leading, and I would say AstraZeneca, Novartis and Roche are amongst in the forefront. Why is it slow? I think because there's been a lot of conservatism in the industry. Rightly so, because there's always a lot of retribution if things do go wrong. But I think if the pharmaceutical companies don't adopt this agenda quickly, actually Verily and Calico, which are essentially biopharmaceutical companies owned by Google, Microsoft, and other tech companies will be the ones who will take this agenda forward. As we speak, there are people in those companies working on diseases of aging and using some of this technology as an integral way of working, and pretty much the same we do. I think pharmaceutical companies will have to get on this bandwagon, and if they don't, then they risk being a different sort of entry. In the same way as who would have thought that the biggest taxi firm in the world doesn't own a car, Uber. You can change the business model very quickly with people who are looking at it from a completely different way. And for our system, although actually we were at the forefront of doing this from a kind of small company point of view, when we started at the end of 2013, Einstein said the best way of going backwards is standing still. And there are so many new entrants into this arena. We are going to have to continue to innovate and grow our platform. So I can't predict what it's going to look like in 5 years' time, but I can only say it's going to be doing a hell of a lot more.
Brilliant, thank you. So, artificial intelligence, Julie, are there other ways in which that can impact on our world?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really interesting conversations happening in the healthcare field about the role of AI in healthcare, and some of that is about trying to diagnose conditions early. Some of that is about how we can use artificial intelligence to improve the quality of service and care that we provide. And one of the other things that we're looking at the moment is a machine learning driven tool that acts kind of like a personal shopper for Parkinson's advice. So it uses machine learning to match you, a person with Parkinson's, or the carer, friend, family of that person, with other people who are like you and the questions that they have asked. So if you are somebody who is got a diagnosis of Parkinson's, wondering about the implications of that for you and your work and what's going to change likely in the next few years by asking you a few simple questions, and then over time understanding how you are like other people in a similar situation. It will start proactively giving you the next stage of advice that would be useful. So we're seeing quite a lot of interesting applications in the kind of information and support provision as well as in the research agenda. We're leading a partnership with a series of other charities to create that tool.
Fantastic, thank you. And the whole issue of prevention and diagnosis, I don't know, Jackie, David, whether you have any comments on how AI can help us with that challenge of diagnosing people earlier, before the symptoms develop.
Well, I think that if one has cohort studies where you're studying people for over a period of time before they show any changes, and some of the initiatives the UK government have been very proactive in there, and then being able to look at, say, genetic, dietary and other factors, kind of exercise, a whole range of things, then one might be able to pick up particular, we call them endotypes, but they're really like patient signatures, if you will, that say this patient, it could be on this trajectory in their time of developing the disease. These patients are in a different trajectory. Recently, I chaired a Innovate call for centres of pathology, digital pathology and radiology across the UK. They've just been announced. You know, in terms of diagnosis, instead of having to wait instead of taking days or hours to diagnose or read scans, you can do it in minutes or seconds. And so that has to be good in terms of cutting down in terms of the bottlenecks in the NHS and also helping people get their diagnosis much quicker.
So one of the other things worth pointing out is that, you mentioned your smartphone, and we can capture so much information about your Parkinson's on the smartphone that now, rather than actually when people go to see the neurologist, it's a snapshot of a 30-minute examination. We can look at how people move around the house, see how their tremors are, see whether they're going out more shopping and things. You could potentially capture all that data, and that can be fed into clinical trials so you can better assess whether a drug is being effective or not. It's very difficult to do that when you just have a 30-minute examination with a neurologist every few months.
Well, I'll give you a very practical example. We're using wearables in our trial of excessive daytime sleepiness in Parkinson's disease. Now, the regulatory endpoint for that is a subjective scale, the Epworth Sleepiness Scale. And patients fill it in, saying they're not feeling sleepy in front of the neurologist when the neurologist can see they're going asleep. So, the wearable device can really help in terms of a more objective measure, as David said.
And that was the theme of last year's lecture, wasn't it? How the people participating in trials felt that the measures weren't actually representative of real life. So I think that's really encouraging. A few questions for you, Emma. What's your favourite app? And maybe tell us something a little bit about the Emma Watch and where that's kind of got to.
My microphone keeps slipping, so I hope you can still hear me. My favourite app from our list is actually the sleep app, because I don't get a lot of sleep like most people with Parkinson's, and it just works so well. I think the great thing about a lot of these apps are they're kind of human apps. They're not people with Parkinson's apps, and actually we are ultimately all humans. There's over 40 symptoms of Parkinson's that you can kind of have to bolt together all these different apps to make it work for you, and actually that's one that is in my little kind of collection of ones that I can't do without, because it just talks you very gently into sleep. It's very calming. And it works so well for everyone across the board. It was the one that kind of came back with the really great feedback. So that's my favourite one. I would recommend it to anyone having sleep problems, and that's called Pziz, P-Z-I-Z-Z. I think I've spelled that right. I hope I've spelled that right. And then the M Watch, basically we're kind of seeing what we can do with working with Hyan to see if there's any way that we can test it, to kind of do any further testing on it, to see whether it is the most niche product that's ever been created in the world ever and just works for me, or whether it works for other human beings as well. Because it'd be really great if we can do something else with it.
Yeah, so we're exploring the next stage of a partnership on that right now. So hopefully we'll have news to share soon.
Hopefully.
Okay, brilliant. And some questions from the live stream. One which was about explaining in a bit more detail how the swallowing app works. And another, perhaps for you to think about, Julie. Someone's asking about the role of Parkinson's UK in recommending apps that cost money and our approach to that.
So the swallowing app actually is really very simple. It kind of, I think a lot of the time with Parkinson's, it's when you stop being able to kind of automate things that actually your body would normally do and your brain would normally remind you to do. And it actually, a lot of people kind of struggle with drooling. I know people struggle with drooling, and I know there's people on the panel that actually had to leave their jobs because of the embarrassment of drooling. This literally just tells you, like, gives a little alarm every time you need to swallow. And it works as simply as that, and it reminds you to swallow, and you don't drool. It's very clever. And I think that's the smart thing about a lot of these apps. They're just people created by people that have seen a need for something and then kind of have taken it further. And just to kind of start your answer, if that's okay.
Feel free to answer it.
We tried really hard to kind of take that into consideration, and that's actually why, so the financial side of things, that's why we put the element in about the testing panel with people with Parkinson's, because actually they are financially conscious, they are aware of the budget they have to spend, and a lot of these apps have kind of initial levels that you can do quite a lot with that are free. And we've actually not included lots of the ones that are really expensive because we didn't actually in the end see that they were beneficial for that reason. So that's kind of one of the reasons we put that level of testing in, because perhaps a clinician might recommend something because it works, but actually if it's, you know, say £1,000 for a subscription for the year, no one can afford that. It's not going to be something that's kind of kept up. So adding that level of people testing it and them actually thinking with their wallets has been really successful, I think.
Yeah. And the one thing I would add to that is we see our role as Parkinson's UK is very much about encouraging the market. So there's a number of things already out there, and there are going to be additions to that list quite soon. But we also know that there are unmet needs amongst the Parkinson's community that could be met through technologies, and we have conversations with developers and companies looking at meeting some of those needs, where we can start telling them about the ways to address them, and we can tell them about our process to make sure they're thinking about things like the security of data captured, about the usability, about making sure that clinical effectiveness is really, really considered and not making false claims. But also talking to those companies about what affordable means. We want to make sure that those companies do exist in perpetuity, so they have to have financially sustainable models. We're not saying, hey, you know, you've got to make them for free, but making sure that we're making sure that anything that we're recommending is good value for money is really, really important.
And what's the plan then to ensure that doctors, nurses, GPs, neurologists are recommending them these apps to their patients?
Yeah. It's been really interesting, I think, the shift in the new health minister, or not that new, so I think Matt Hancock's been in post since June, and his team are very, very pro the role of technology in helping people live well and in the prescription of technologies alongside medication and other therapies. And suddenly starting to see a little kind of frisson of questions and interest emerging from health and social care professionals. And we think we've got a role in offering them these peer-reviewed assessments alongside a really, the assessment process we go through with our mobile health, and we've got some of the guys from that team in the room that you can ask them questions to. It's very rigorous. The initial questionnaire is 300 questions. Yeah. So we can now be in a position where through the Excellence Network, so the network of professionals that we facilitate, we can say the things in this list, they're safe. And we can see that they work for people. There's also obviously the side of things looking at devices that may not be directly available to people affected by Parkinson's, but may be available through their consultants or other healthcare professionals, and we're looking at how we shape those things. So we have been partnering with a couple of those devices, one called the Parkinson's Kinetograph, or PKG, which monitors effectiveness of medication over the day, on and off states, and allows a much speedier assessment of how well the drug regime is working for you, so that it can be adjusted. We know that small adjustments in the way that drugs are delivered, the times that drugs are delivered, can make a big, big difference to quality of life during the day. So we're also working directly with the clinical community on that side of devices and apps too.
I remember being at a meeting recently, and a guy came up to me so happy that he'd persuaded his optician to make his varifocals upside down. And I kind of said, that's great, but why? And he was saying, I stoop, I slump. But actually, this makes me look up near the bottom of my glasses, not the top. And I walk around like this, I sit and watch television like this. And I thought that was fantastic. And another guy who said he was a shoemaker and he's changed his soles of his shoes to make it lean back and not fall. And it just, the ingenuity, the imagination of the community, I just think is just immense. And so I just wonder how we, as a movement, really are kind of tapping into that and driving that kind of innovation.
Well, I mean, I think you heard from Emma about the panel of 94 people and growing, and that was a kind of our first attempt to have a pool of people that we could do some testing with. But actually, the ambition is to open up those opportunities and others to to anybody who wants to be involved. There's a lot of people doing incredible things, and we're interested in people's ideas. We do hear these kind of ingenious and often very, very personal solutions that people have come up with that we think, well, actually, probably that's really useful for other people. How can we replicate that? How can we talk to some of the companies making devices about these ingenious ideas people have had so that they can feed them into their products? We have
and
a role
also
in that.
talking to sort of people that are really in the early stages of learning how to make devices and things. So I've had a couple of calls in the last few weeks with people from schools, and they're kind of choosing to make devices for their GCSE tech. That's fantastic. That's incredible, because they're the brains of the future. So
they'll put us all out of work really soon.
Definitely.
Fantastic. Okay, so I think that's a good answer to the question that someone raised about how to get involved and take action on the technology stream. Just coming to...
Sorry, I was going to say, there's a link. I'll see if we can share it out perhaps on our Twitter this evening, which is to join the panel. So if anyone's interested, if anyone living in the UK has Parkinson's and would like to join, wherever you live, however old you are, whether you're tech savvy or not, we'd love you to join. So there's a link. We'll get that tweeted out later.
So let's just close by asking you all to make a comment. Just imagine we're here in 5 years' time. How is the world going to look different? How is the Parkinson's world going to look different because of the things we've been talking about today? What's your vision and dream?
I've got quite a strong vision on this, I think. I kind of almost see technology being something that makes us superhuman as people with Parkinson's or people with long-term health conditions, that we can actually almost hover above ourselves with the power of technology and AI and things like that to make informed decisions about our lives, that we wouldn't be able to see those patterns. I mean, I feel like I do the same things day in, day out, but get different responses to it. And actually having something that can kind of see those patterns and kind of suggest adjustments, suggest when I should leave the house, I feel like they're things that would be really useful to me, and I think that really might be the future. It's quite attainable, I think.
Brilliant. Julie?
I think for me, it's about seeing the kind of life-change, rapid growth in this market of potentially life-changing, life-improving technologies being available directly to people at an affordable cost and in an accessible way, but also being prescribed alongside the medication, alongside doing the right kinds of exercise, alongside the other kinds of therapies on an equal footing, because they are things that make change possible in the short term. And I think we'll see an answer to some aspect of almost every Parkinson's symptom. They won't work for everybody because the condition is so specific, and technology isn't for everyone, but increasingly I think we'll see it being part of the kind of prescribed answer.
Thanks. Jackie?
Well, I'd like to see actually a lot of the data that's coming from those sort of apps and devices incorporated with other clinical data to enable us to better understand Parkinson's disease and the course of the patient, and how patients will respond to drugs and to other interventions, so that we can make things better for people more quickly. Out of the collaboration, I'd like to see at least 1 or 2 repurposed drugs have been in clinical trial, and hopefully some new targets identified as well.
David, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's going to change everything, really. It's, eventually this is going to allow us to tie up the NHS system as well. So whether you're somebody affected by Parkinson's who lives in Liverpool and they've gone to Brighton on holiday and they've got their prescription, you'll be able to see that online by visiting the local GP and get it reissued. All the way to speeding up the drug discovery. So I think it's just going to be a really broad benefit to everything. So we're going to speed up the drug delivery, but also at the benefit end of exercise apps and everything. I think it's just going to transform everything.
Oh, and one of the things that struck me in the video that you showed, Emma, was all those pills. Doctors give combinations all the time. We've got the technology to do 3D printing, 3D placing of mixing medicines that need to be administered together in ways that really reduce the pill burden on the patient. And then you've got Amazon who'll come and do your drone delivery for you from the factory.
Fantastic. I think really exciting, and I think what I want to just say in close as Chief Executive of the charity is I'm really determined that we're at the forefront of this, that we're not just passively waiting to happen, that we can make sure the voice, the experience of people affected by Parkinson's is really shaping this, and it becomes a real game changer in the way that our panelists have described. So it's goodbye to everybody who's been watching the live stream. Thank you for engaging us in that way, and do feedback your ideas and suggestions. And I'd like to hand over to Mark Goodrich, again, the chair of the charity.
Thank you very much, Steve. Emma, you're a great inspiration as always. Thank you ever so much for coming along.